It's strange how silence can be louder than words, especially when it comes from the people you love the most. My name is Martha Lin, and I'm 68 years old. I used to believe that motherhood was the purest form of purpose, that if I gave everything to my child, I would never be alone. I was wrong. If this story touched your heart, then don't leave just yet. Every week I share stories about love, family, loss, and the quiet strength it takes to begin again. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and be part of a place where emotions matter more than endings. Because somewhere in these stories, you might just find a piece of your own. For the past 3 years, I've been living with my son Daniel and his wife Emily, helping them raise their little boy, Owen. When Daniel asked me to move in after my husband passed away, he said, "Mom, we don't want you living alone. Come stay with us. We'll take care of each other." Those words warmed my heart back then, but over time, we turned into them, and each other became me taking care of everyone else. That evening started like any other. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the kitchen clock, the smell of garlic and onions filling the air as I prepared dinner. I was cutting carrots into thin slices when Emily walked in, her heels clicking sharply on the tiles. She looked beautiful, as always, young, composed, glowing with the kind of energy I had lost years ago. She smiled politely, but there was distance in her eyes. "Mom," she began softly, adjusting the strap of her purse. "You don't need to cook tonight. We're going out for dinner." I wiped my hands on the kitchen towel, a little surprised. "Oh, that's nice. Where are we going?" Her smile faltered for a moment. Barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Oh no, Mom," she said, lowering her voice. "It's just Daniel's team from the office. A small dinner to celebrate his project. You know how these things are. You wouldn't enjoy it." There was a polite kindness in her tone, the kind that stings more than cruelty. "I see," I said, forcing a smile. "Of course. You two go ahead. I'll watch Owen." Emily hesitated, eyes flicking toward the hallway. "Actually, we're taking Owen with us. My parents will be there too. They've been wanting to see him." My hands went still on the counter. The kitchen clock ticked louder. "Oh," was all I managed to say. She looked relieved that I didn't protest. "There are leftovers in the fridge," she added cheerfully. "Just heat them up later, okay?" Then she was gone, her perfume lingering in the empty air, the front door closing with a soft click that felt like a final punctuation mark. For a while, I just stood there, staring at the half-cut carrots on the board. The knife gleamed under the kitchen light, but everything else felt dim. The house was quiet, painfully quiet, the kind of silence that settles deep into your chest and refuses to leave. I sat down at the table, my hands resting in my lap, and listened to the faint echo of their laughter fading down the hallway. For the first time in a long time, I realized something simple yet unbearable. It wasn't that they forgot to invite me. It was that they never thought I belonged there anymore. Sometimes the loudest noise in a house isn't a cry or a shout. It's the sound of absence. After the front door closed behind Emily and Daniel, the silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. Even the clock seemed to hesitate between ticks, as if the room itself was holding its breath. I turned off the stove, washed the cutting board, and placed the untouched vegetables back in the fridge. For a moment, I stared at the refrigerator door, covered with little magnets shaped like fruits, photos of Owen with his toothless smile, and a grocery list I had written in neat cursive. Everything looked so normal, so ordinary, and yet, tonight I felt invisible in my own kitchen. I sat down at the small dining table, the same one where I had served countless breakfasts and dinners since moving in. The tablecloth was slightly frayed at the edges. I had planned to buy a new one, but every time I thought of spending on myself, I told myself, later, there's always something more important. Now, staring at the empty plates, I wondered when I had stopped being one of those important things. I heard a faint hum from the refrigerator, a soft mechanical drone that filled the emptiness. On the counter, a single bowl of leftover pasta sat under cling film. Emily's voice echoed in my mind. "There are leftovers in the fridge. Just heat them up later, okay?" It wasn't the words themselves that hurt. It was what they meant. Leftovers. The perfect metaphor for what I had become. Something once needed, now merely there, waiting to be used when convenient. I picked up my phone out of habit. No new messages. No calls. I scrolled aimlessly through photos. Daniel as a little boy, sitting on the kitchen counter, flour on his nose, laughing while I baked cookies. He used to call me Supermom. He used to think I could fix anything. And now, I couldn't even fix this growing distance between us. The loneliness seeped deeper with each passing minute. The kind that doesn't just live in your mind. It sits in your bones. To escape it, I turned on the TV. The screen flickered to life, filling the room with voices I didn't care about. Game shows, jingles, strangers laughing. But even those voices felt hollow, bouncing off the walls of a place that no longer felt like home. When Daniel was young, our house was never quiet. Arthur, my late husband, used to hum old jazz tunes while reading the newspaper. Daniel would shout from the yard, "Mom, look at me," every time he learned something new. Riding his bike, climbing the apple tree, catching his first firefly. And I would look. I always looked, but now there was no one to look for me. No one who noticed whether I was sitting, standing, or simply disappearing in plain sight. I got up, unable to bear the stillness, and went to my small bedroom at the end of the hall. The walls were lined with photos. Daniel's graduation, our family trip to the lake, Arthur holding baby Owen. I touched Arthur's face in one of the frames. He had that kind, quiet smile I missed more than anything. "You wouldn't believe how it's changed," I whispered. "The house feels so full, and yet I feel so small in it." The words caught in my throat, heavy with the kind of grief that doesn't make you cry. It just makes you tired. I sat by the window looking out into the street. The sun had already set, leaving streaks of gold and violet across the sky. A car passed, its headlights brushing across the curtains. Somewhere far off I could hear children laughing. Probably neighbors. Probably mothers calling them inside for dinner. I wondered who would ever call me to the table again. The smell of food still lingered. Garlic, tomatoes. A faint sweetness from the sauce I had started cooking before Emily stopped me. That smell used to mean family, warmth, connection. Now it was just a reminder of something lost, like perfume on an empty pillow. The phone buzzed suddenly, making me jump. For a second, my heart lifted. Maybe Daniel? Maybe he realized how it felt to leave me behind. It wasn't him. It was an automated message from the pharmacy reminding me to refill my prescription. I let out a small laugh. Not from humor, but from the absurdity of it. The only thing that remembered me was a machine. I stood up and returned to the kitchen, unable to leave things undone. I took the leftovers out of the fridge and placed them in the microwave. As the plate turned slowly, the hum of the machine filled the room. The reflection on the glass showed my face. Faint lines, tired eyes, and a woman who had once been someone's entire world. When the microwave beeped, I sat down with the warm plate, the steam curling like little ghosts in the air. I took a bite. It was bland, tasteless. Or maybe it was me who had lost the taste for eating alone. I pushed the plate away halfway through and sighed. "Enough," I whispered to no one. Then, almost without thinking, I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out an old photo album. Dust rose as I opened it. There we were, young, hopeful, a family of 3 smiling under the sun. Each page told a story of love, laughter, effort, and dreams. And as I turned the last page, I realized, somewhere along the way, my story had stopped being told. I closed the album slowly, pressing my palm against its cover. In the empty kitchen behind me, the refrigerator hummed again, steady and indifferent, a sound that had become my only companion. That night I didn't cry. I just sat there quietly, realizing that the silence wasn't new. I had been living with it for years. I just hadn't wanted to hear it until now. Sometimes, it's not what people say that shatters you. It's the picture that tells you exactly where you no longer belong. The next evening came like any other, slow, ordinary, and heavy with routine, the kind of evening where you already know how it will end, in silence. I woke up early that morning, made breakfast, ironed Daniel's shirt, and packed Owen's little lunchbox with his favorite animal-shaped sandwiches. No one asked me to do it, but habits don't need permission. They grow roots in you, deep and quiet, until you can't tell where duty ends and love begins. When Emily came into the kitchen, she looked surprised to see the food already set on the table. "Mom, you didn't have to," she said lightly, pouring herself coffee. Her words sounded polite, but they felt like a dismissal, not gratitude. I smiled anyway. "It's fine. I like to start the day early," she nodded, distracted, scrolling through her phone as she sipped. Daniel entered a few minutes later, adjusting his tie, looking handsome and rushed, just like his father used to on Monday mornings. He smiled at me. "Smells great, Mom. You always make the best eggs." For a second, that little boy who once begged for pancakes at 6 a.m. flickered behind his adult eyes, and my heart warmed. But just as quickly, Emily interrupted. "Honey, we're running late. We'll grab something on the way." He hesitated, looked at me apologetically, and then nodded. "Yeah, we probably should." The sound of their footsteps faded down the hallway, followed by the soft thud of the front door. And just like that, the breakfast I had prepared turned into another plate of leftovers. I stared at the food for a long time, then quietly cleared it away. All day, I tried to stay busy, cleaned the living room, folded laundry, watered the plants. But no matter how much I wiped or straightened or scrubbed, the stillness clung to me like dust. Sometimes I wondered, if I stopped doing all these little chores, would anyone even notice? Or would the house simply adjust without me, as if I'd never been here at all? By evening, I was sitting by the window, a cup of tea growing cold beside me, when my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. My heart fluttered. Maybe an apology, maybe a kind word. I unlocked it quickly. It wasn't a message. It was a photo. A large table lit by soft golden light, wine glasses, laughter. Daniel at the center, raising a toast, pride gleaming in his eyes. Emily next to him, radiant as ever. Her parents sitting on the other side. And on Emily's father's lap, my grandson, Owen, smiling wide. A little piece of my heart caught in someone else's arms. Everyone was there, except me. At first, I stared at the picture as if I were trying to find myself hidden somewhere in the reflection of a wine glass, or maybe in the corner of the frame. But there was nothing, not even a chair left empty. Underneath the photo, Emily had typed, "Wonderful night celebrating Daniel's success. So proud of him." I didn't know what hurt more. The fact that they hadn't invited me, or the fact that they hadn't even noticed they hadn't. As if I'd been erased so gently that even they didn't realize it. I put the phone down, but it kept lighting up again and again. Likes, hearts, comments from Daniel's colleagues and friends. "Beautiful family. You all look amazing." Each comment was like a small knife twisting in slow motion. Beautiful family. Yes, they were beautiful and complete without me. My tea had gone cold, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I felt this strange hollowness spreading inside, the kind that isn't made of sadness, but of realization. A realization that all the years I spent building a home, raising a child, making sure everyone else was loved, had slowly turned me into a ghost walking through the walls of her own life. The phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from Daniel. "Mom, just checking in. Don't wait up. We might be late. Love you. Love you." 2 small words that used to mean everything. Now they felt like an afterthought. Typed out of habit, not feeling. I typed a reply, then erased it. Typed again. Erased again. In the end, I sent just 1 word. "Okay." After that, I placed the phone face down on the table, the hard click of the case against the wood sounding too loud in the quiet room. The house around me was still. Owen's toys lined neatly on the rug, Emily's perfume faint in the hallway, Daniel's jacket still hanging by the door. All of it familiar, but none of it mine. My eyes drifted to a photo frame on the shelf. An old family picture from years ago. Daniel was 6, sitting between Arthur and me, all 3 of us laughing at something outside the frame. Back then we were the whole picture, and now I wasn't even part of it. The thought hit me so sharply that I had to sit down. I tried to blink away the tears, but they came anyway. Not the loud kind, not the sobs that ask for comfort, just quiet tears slipping down my face, warm and heavy, like memories that refused to be forgotten. I whispered into the still air. "Arthur, if you could see this, would you tell me where I went wrong?" Of course, there was no answer. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator, steady and indifferent, the same as last night. When the tears finally stopped, I reached for the phone again, not to look at the photo but to open my gallery. I scrolled to the oldest pictures. Daniel's first day of school, his graduation, his wedding, page after page of my life's work, and somewhere in the middle of all those smiles, I realized something quietly devastating. They had moved forward, and I had stayed behind, clutching a world that no longer existed. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I didn't watch TV. I simply sat there by the window, looking at the city lights flicker in the distance, each one belonging to someone else's story. Mine, it seemed, had been paused, but for the first time I wondered, maybe it didn't have to stay that way. The past never leaves quietly. It lingers in the walls, in the smells, in the way your hands still move out of habit for people who no longer need them. The morning light crept through the curtains in thin golden lines. Soft, almost apologetic. I hadn't really slept. My mind had been running in quiet circles all night, chasing moments that no longer existed. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the faint crack on the wall. Funny how it looked like a branch, growing upward, splitting in 2, just like my life had. Down the hallway, I could hear Emily laughing with Owen. A light, airy laugh that once might have warmed me. Now it only made me feel like a guest overhearing someone else's happiness. I picked up my old shawl from the chair, the one Arthur had given me for my birthday. It still carried the faint scent of jasmine from the perfume I used to wear when he was alive. Back then he used to tease me, saying I wore it just to compete with the flowers in the garden. I smiled at the memory, even as it ached. It had been 12 years since Arthur passed, but sometimes it felt like yesterday, other times like another lifetime entirely. He had been quiet, dependable, and endlessly kind. The sort of man who didn't say, "I love you," often, but said it in every small thing he did, fixing my chair when it wobbled, leaving the last piece of toast for me, holding my hand under the table when we visited his strict mother. He had a way of making me feel seen. After he was gone, I thought Daniel would fill that space. Not as a husband, of course, but as family. But love changes shape over time. A son's love, I realized, doesn't stay the same. It grows outward, attaching itself to new people, new homes, new worlds. And somehow, without anyone meaning to, the mother gets left behind. I made myself tea, black, no sugar, and sat by the window again. The city outside was already awake. Cars, bicycles, children in uniforms, all moving forward, unaware of the woman behind the glass, watching life as if it were a play she no longer had a role in. The spoon clinked against the cup, a tiny sound in a big silence. And suddenly, memories began to surface. One after another, uninvited but insistent. I saw myself in my 20s, rushing through the morning rain with Arthur's lunch wrapped in cloth, laughing as my shoes splashed in puddles. I saw Daniel as a baby, clutching my finger, his tiny hand trusting me completely. I remembered the years we spent saving every penny for his education. Arthur taking extra shifts, me stitching clothes late into the night. We had dreams, not for ourselves, but for him, always for him, and he had made it. A good job, a lovely wife, a beautiful home, everything we wanted for him. So why did it hurt so much to realize that, in giving him everything, I had nothing left that was mine? I took a sip of tea, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. It tasted like regret. Later that day, I went to the attic, a dusty space above the garage, where we'd stored boxes from the old house. Emily had once mentioned she wanted to declutter it. I wanted to see it one last time before my life's history was put in the trash. The air was thick with dust and memories. I opened the first box I saw. Old photo albums, greeting cards, the blue porcelain teapot Arthur and I bought from a flea market on our honeymoon. My fingers brushed over each item like they were fragile pieces of time. There was a letter in one of the boxes, folded neatly inside an envelope that had yellowed with age. Arthur's handwriting. Martha, if you're reading this someday, and I'm not around, I want you to remember something. You were never meant to live only through others. You're the story, too, not just the one who tells it. Don't fade, my love. Promise me that. I felt the tears before I even realized I was crying. 12 years later, his words found me like sunlight in a dark room. How could he have known? How could he have seen the future so clearly? This version of me, quiet and shrinking, existing in the corners of someone else's home. I pressed the letter to my chest, my sobs silent but deep. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't Emily's fault. Not really. She was young, busy, trying to build her own world, just as I once had. It wasn't Daniel's fault either. He had never seen me as lonely, only as dependable. He assumed I was fine because I always said I was. I had taught them both to believe that my happiness came from theirs. And in a way, it had, until there was none left for me. I sat there until the light shifted, golden to amber, then to gray. Dust floated in the sunlight like tiny ghosts of all the years gone by. I realized I wasn't angry, just tired. When I finally came downstairs, the house was empty again. Emily had taken Owen to his piano class. Daniel was still at work. The air was still, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. And yet, for the first time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility. Maybe Arthur was right. Maybe there was still a story left. Mine. I folded his letter carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Tomorrow I decided I would visit our old neighborhood, the place where everything began. Maybe the past still had something to teach me. Sometimes you have to return to the place where your story began, not to relive it, but to understand how you became the person standing outside its doors. The bus ride was longer than I remembered. Maybe it was because the city had changed. New roads, new faces, new names, for places that once felt familiar. Or maybe it was because I had changed, and everything now carried a weight it didn't before. The window glass was slightly fogged, and I drew a small circle with my fingertip, just like I used to when Daniel was little. He would laugh and press his tiny hand over mine, trying to copy the shape. I could almost hear his childish voice echoing. "Look, Mommy, it's a window planet." That memory alone was enough to make my throat tighten. When the bus finally stopped, I stepped out carefully, holding my shawl closer against the cool afternoon breeze. There it was, our old house, smaller than I remembered but still standing, its white paint now faded and peeling like old paper. The gate creaked when I pushed it open, and the sound made my heart ache in the strangest way. It was as if time itself had paused here, waiting for me to come back. The garden was overgrown. The rose bushes Arthur had planted were wild and unkempt, but one stubborn bloom, a pale pink, still swayed gently in the wind. I knelt beside it and smiled. "Still fighting, aren't you?" I whispered. "Just like me." I walked to the porch, my footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. The wooden steps groaned under my weight, the same familiar creak that once made Arthur say, "We'll fix that tomorrow." But tomorrow had come and gone, 12 years ago. The door was locked, of course. The new owners hadn't moved in yet. I had heard through a neighbor that the property was about to be demolished to make way for apartments. Still, I stood there, touching the doorknob, remembering how many times I'd turned it, coming home from grocery runs, from school meetings, from hospital visits, always coming home. And now, I wasn't sure what that word even meant. I sat down on the front step and looked around. The sunlight fell through the branches, scattering across the yard like pieces of memory. The sound of a child's laughter drifted from a house nearby. For a second, it felt like Daniel again, running barefoot, shouting, "Mom, watch me!" And I, apron dusted with flour, standing right here clapping and cheering like he was the greatest boy in the world, which, to me, he was. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my hands. They fell softly, one after another, as if each one carried a year I'd lost. I wasn't crying just for the house. I was crying for her, the woman who once lived here, the woman who had dreams, laughter, a husband who loved her, and a child who needed her. The woman who slowly gave pieces of herself away until there was nothing left to claim. A voice broke my thoughts. "Mrs. Lin?" I looked up. It was Helen, my old neighbor. She was holding a small basket of oranges and wore the same warm smile I remembered from decades ago. "Martha, it's really you," she said, walking over quickly. "I almost didn't recognize you. You look thinner." I laughed softly, wiping my cheeks. "Life does that to you." She sat beside me, placing the basket on the step. "I heard about the demolition," she said gently. "I didn't think you'd come back to see it." "I had to," I replied. "It's the only place that still remembers me." Helen sighed. "We get old, and people forget we were once the center of someone's world." Her words landed heavy, because they were true. We sat in silence for a while, just listening to the rustling leaves. Then Helen said, "You know, your son came by here a few months ago. He met the developers, said he was handling the paperwork for you. I thought maybe you'd sold the place." I turned to her sharply. "Paperwork? For me?" "Yes," she said, frowning. "Didn't he tell you?" The wind seemed to still for a moment. My heart started to beat faster. "No, he didn't." She looked at me, puzzled. "Maybe I'm mistaken, but I saw him sign some forms. He said it was all approved by you." I forced a small smile. "Oh, I see." But inside, I felt something cold unfurl. A slow realization that this visit might not just be about memories. It might be about truth. We talked for a while longer. About the old days. About her grandchildren. About how fast everything changes. But even as she spoke, my mind wasn't fully there. It kept circling back to what she'd said. Daniel. Paperwork. Approved by me. When Helen finally hugged me goodbye, I stood there alone again, staring at the house. Its cracked windows, its fading walls, the echoes of laughter still hidden inside. I placed my hand against the door one last time. "Thank you," I whispered, "for holding us all those years." Then I turned and walked away. The bus ride back felt longer this time, but I wasn't numb anymore. I was thinking, deeply, clearly, about love, about trust, about how easily affection can turn into assumption, and beneath all of that, something sharper, the quiet suspicion that maybe, just maybe, my own son had done something behind my back. By the time I reached home, the sun had set completely. The house was dark, still and silent, but the silence no longer frightened me. It fueled me. Trust doesn't break all at once. It cracks quietly, like old glass, long before it finally shatters. That night, I couldn't sleep. Helen's words kept circling in my head like a haunting melody. Your son came by. He said the paperwork was all approved by you. Paperwork, approved, by me. But I had never signed anything, never seen a single document about the old house. The last time Daniel had mentioned it, he'd said vaguely, "Mom, don't worry about the property. I'll take care of it." And like always, I had trusted him. I sat at the small desk in my room, the one squeezed beside the window, and pulled out a folder from the drawer where I kept old letters and utility bills. There, neatly clipped together, were a few envelopes Daniel had given me months ago. "Just some things to sign for taxes," he'd said casually. I had signed them without reading, as I always did, because he was my son. Because trust, I thought, was love. My fingers trembled as I opened them now. The first few pages were ordinary. Receipts, insurance forms, nothing alarming. But halfway through the pile, I found it. A property agreement, typed in neat, impersonal language, the kind that drains emotion from even the most personal of decisions. And at the bottom, my name, my signature, except it wasn't mine. It looked similar, but not quite. The curve of the M was wrong. The slant of the A, too sharp. A forgery. Careful, practiced, but unmistakable to the person whose hand it was meant to imitate. For a long moment, I just stared at it, my throat tightening. Then I whispered out loud, "Daniel, what have you done?" I pressed the paper against my chest as if that could make the words disappear. But they didn't. The truth sat there, cold and cruel. He had used my name, my trust, to sell the last piece of my life that still belonged to me. The tears didn't come right away. They stayed trapped behind something heavier. Disbelief, because betrayal doesn't feel real at first. It feels like a mistake you're sure can be explained. I sat there, waiting for an explanation that never came. The next morning, Daniel was at the breakfast table, scrolling through his phone, his coffee steaming beside him. Emily was packing Owen's school bag. They looked so normal, so calm, while I felt like I was sitting on the edge of a storm. I waited until Emily stepped out with Owen before speaking. "Daniel," I began, my voice quieter than I intended. "Can we talk?" He glanced up, distracted. "Sure, Mom, what's up?" I placed the papers in front of him. "Helen told me she saw you signing documents for the old house. Said I'd approved them." His expression froze for a fraction of a second, so fast that if I hadn't been looking closely, I might have missed it. Then he smiled, easy and practiced. "Oh, that? Yeah, Mom, don't worry. It's all settled. You'll get your share soon." "My share?" I repeated softly. He nodded. "Yeah, the developers needed your signature, but it was just a formality. You hate reading those long documents, remember? So I handled it. Everything's fine." "But, Daniel," I said slowly, pointing to the page, "this isn't my signature." He hesitated. Just a flicker. A tiny crack in the confident tone. Then he shrugged. "Mom, come on. It's just paperwork. You said yourself you don't want to deal with all that legal stuff." I was helping. "Helping," I whispered. "By pretending to be me?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, please don't make this a big deal. You live here, don't you? We're family. Everything's for us. For Owen. For the future." There it was. That one word again. Us. Except it never really included me, did it? I looked at him. My son, the boy I once carried on my hip. The boy I'd fed, taught, and prayed for every night. And I didn't recognize him. The man sitting across from me was polite, practical, efficient, and utterly detached. He was everything I had wanted him to become, except kind. "Daniel," I said softly, "did you ever think to ask me what I wanted?" He looked confused, as if the question itself didn't make sense. "Mom, you don't need to worry about money or property. You have us. You have this house. You're comfortable. Comfortable. Such a small, lifeless word. He didn't understand that comfort isn't the same as belonging. I folded the papers carefully, keeping my hand steady. "You should go to work," I said quietly. He frowned. "Mom, are you mad at me?" "No," I said, forcing a smile. "Not mad. Just broken." After he left, I sat there for a long time staring at the empty chair across the table. My hands felt heavy, my heart heavier still. I had always believed betrayal came from strangers, not from the people you built your world around. Later that day, I went to the local council office. The clerk confirmed what I already feared. The sale was finalized, funds transferred, and yes, the authorization form carried my signature. It was all legal now. Undoing it would be difficult, maybe impossible. When I came home, Emily was in the living room, playing with Owen. She looked up, smiling. "Mom, you're home early. Did you eat?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. She kept talking, her tone light. "You know, when the apartments are ready, Daniel said we'll get one unit on the ground floor. You'll have your own room, close to the kitchen so it's easy for you to cook." Her words hit me like a blow I hadn't braced for. Close to the kitchen, easy to cook. And in that instant, I understood everything. This wasn't about care or family or love. It was convenience. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was part of the furniture, useful, but invisible. That night, I took out Arthur's letter from my pocket, the one I'd found in the attic. I read it again, slowly, as the words blurred through my tears. "You are the story, too. Don't fade, my love." For the first time in years, I whispered back, "I won't, Arthur. Not anymore." Sometimes, all it takes to remember who you are is someone who still calls you by your name, not your title. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up to a house that felt different. It looked the same cream walls, the same ticking clock. But the air had changed. Every sound, every silence, carried a weight now. Daniel and Emily moved around the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. They didn't know I'd heard everything. The arguments about property, about managing Mom's emotions, about not upsetting her too much. I didn't interrupt. I just sat in my room, quietly folding and refolding my shawl, as if my hands needed to do something to stop shaking. By noon, the house was empty again. Owen was at school, Daniel at work, Emily out with her friends. Only me, and the echo of what used to be my family. I thought of Arthur's letter again, the one that said, "You're the story, too." I wanted to believe it. I really did. But right now, I just felt like a footnote in someone else's chapter. That's when I thought of Helen, the only person who still called me Martha instead of Mom or Grandma or Ma'am. Someone who knew me before the titles, before the quiet erasure of self that came with them. I found her number scribbled in an old address book, the ink slightly faded. When she answered, her voice was warm and familiar. "Martha, I was hoping you'd call. I was hoping you'd pick up," I replied, my voice breaking on the edges of a laugh. "Of course I would," she said. "You sound tired. Come over. I'll make tea." Her house smelled the same as it always had, cardamom, lemon polish, and the faint sweetness of old wood. She lived alone now, too, but there was something peaceful about her solitude, not loneliness, but calm. She led me to the garden where 2 chairs sat under a jacaranda tree. The ground was sprinkled with tiny purple flowers, like someone had spilled a secret across the grass. Helen poured tea and looked at me the way only old friends do, with patience, not pity. "So," she said softly, "tell me everything." And I did. I told her about the photo, the forged signature, the hollow apologies, the way Emily spoke to me as though I were both fragile and in the way. I told her about the kitchen, the leftover meals, the empty nights. And through it all, she just listened. Really listened, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she set her cup down carefully. "Martha," she said, "I've seen this story too many times. Women like us. We spend our whole lives giving, believing that love means staying useful. But love isn't service. It's respect." Her words settled in me like a quiet truth I'd always known, but never dared to say out loud. "I don't want to be angry at them," I said softly. She nodded. "You don't have to be, but you do have to stop disappearing for them." I looked down at my hands, lined, thin, but still capable. "I don't know how to start over, Helen. I'm old. I've forgotten who I am outside of them." Helen smiled faintly. "You're not old, Martha. You're alive. That's a much rarer thing." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flyer. It was for a community center nearby. Calligraphy, gardening, painting, yoga for seniors. "They have classes for people our age," she said. "I go every Wednesday for watercolor painting. You should come. You'd like it." I laughed weakly. "Helen, I haven't held a paintbrush in 30 years. "So what?" she said, shrugging. "You held a family together for 40. I think you can manage a brush." Her words made me smile. A real one. The kind that hadn't reached my face in a long time. It felt strange and healing at once. We talked for hours after that. About our husbands, our youth, the absurdity of growing older in a world that only notices what fades. The sun dipped low behind the jacaranda tree, painting the garden in gold and violet. When it was time to leave, Helen hugged me tightly. "Promise me something," she said, her voice close to my ear. "Promise me you'll stop saying, 'It's fine,' when it isn't." I nodded, tears catching in my throat. "I promise." When I returned home, the house was dark again. I placed my bag on the table and noticed a note stuck to the fridge. "Mom, made dinner for you. Please eat. We'll be late. Daniel's meeting went long. Emily." It was polite, practical, and painfully empty. I looked at the note for a long time, then peeled it off slowly and placed it in the trash. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I made myself tea, sat at the window, and stared at the streetlights flickering to life. For the first time, I didn't think of what was missing. I thought of what could still be found. Maybe I'd go to that calligraphy class. Maybe I'd paint something again. Maybe I'd start living, not just existing between everyone else's needs. I remembered Helen's words again. "Love isn't service. It's respect," and Arthur's letter, folded neatly in my pocket. "Don't fade, my love." So that night, I took a pen and a blank sheet of paper and wrote a single line across the top. My story is not over yet. The ink bled slightly into the paper. Shaky, imperfect, alive, just like me. When you can't speak your truth to the living, you whisper it to the ones who loved you in silence. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I sat at my small writing desk with the lamp turned low. The clock ticked quietly, steady and patient. The kind of sound that keeps you company when the world has gone to bed. Outside, the street was still. Even the wind had fallen silent. On the desk lay a blank sheet of paper and Arthur's old fountain pen, the same one he'd used to sign our marriage certificate 50 years ago. It didn't write as smoothly anymore, but it still carried the weight of our years together. It felt right that I should use it tonight. I dipped the nib in ink, took a deep breath, and began to write. Dear Arthur, it's been 3 years since you left, and yet I still set a place for you at the table sometimes. Not because I've forgotten that you're gone, but because it helps me remember that you were real, that we were real. Do you remember the house on Willow Street? The one with the rose bushes and the squeaky porch? They're tearing it down, Arthur. The place where you built our life. Brick by brick, laugh by laugh. I went to see it yesterday. It looked smaller, lonelier. Maybe it was always like that, and it only felt big, because we were happy inside it. Daniel's grown up now. You'd be proud of him, I think. Successful, confident, so sure of himself. But sometimes I wonder if in becoming all the things we wanted for him, he forgot who taught him how to be kind. He forged my name, Arthur, on papers to sell our old house, our house. I stared at that signature for hours, trying to convince myself it didn't matter, that it was just a mistake, a formality. But the truth is, it broke something inside me that I didn't even know could still break. I'm not angry at him. That's the strange part. I wish I could be. Anger feels clean, sharp, but what I feel is something softer and heavier. Disappointment, maybe. The kind that doesn't shout. It just sits in your chest like a stone. Do you know what hurts the most? It's not the house or the money or even the forgery. It's realizing that I became invisible in my own family, that I turned into someone they don't see, someone who cooks and cleans and smiles and never asks for anything. I thought that's what love meant, but now I see it was something else. Maybe habit, maybe convenience. You used to say, "Martha, you have a heart that forgets itself for others." I used to take that as a compliment. Now I wonder if it was a warning. Helen says I should stop saying, "I'm fine." She says that's the language of women who have spent too long surviving instead of living. She's right, of course. I'm tired of being fine, Arthur. I'm tired of shrinking to fit into spaces that don't want me. I miss the way you looked at me. Not as your wife or the mother of your child, but as me. Do you remember that evening we sat on the porch watching the rain? You said, "Martha, if one day you find yourself alone, promise me you'll still look for the light." I laughed at you then, but tonight I think I finally understand what you meant. I've started writing again, just little things. My thoughts, the way the afternoon sunlight hits the window, the sound of Leo's laughter. Sometimes I think of showing them to someone, but then I stop. Not yet. It's too soon to be seen again. Helen gave me a flyer for a community center. There's a calligraphy class. Can you imagine me holding a brush after all these years? You'd probably tease me about my crooked letters. But maybe I'll go. Maybe it's time. Do you think people can start over at 68? I used to think life was over after loss. After children grow and leave and love fades into routine. But maybe, just maybe, it's the moment we finally begin to live for ourselves. I don't know if I'll send this letter anywhere. Maybe I'll leave it here, between the pages of your old poetry book. That feels right, because this, all of this, is something only you would understand. Wherever you are, Arthur, I hope you're proud of me for finally picking up the pen again, for finally remembering that I still have a voice. Yours, Martha. The pen slipped from my fingers and I sat there in silence, tears blurring the words I had written. I didn't bother to wipe them away. They were part of the ink now. My truth, smudged but still there. I folded the letter carefully, the way I used to fold Daniel's report cards when he was a boy, and slid it into the back of Arthur's favorite poetry book, Leaves of Grass. I ran my fingers over the cover, whispering, "Good night, my love." Then I turned off the lamp. The room was dark, but I didn't feel afraid. For the first time in years, my chest didn't ache from holding back words. The silence around me wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything I'd finally said. That night, I didn't dream of loss. I dreamed of light, faint, distant, but mine. Sometimes healing doesn't start with a grand decision. It starts with showing up, trembling, uncertain, but there. The morning of the class, I woke up before dawn. The world outside was soft and gray, the kind of quiet that only exists before life begins moving. For a few minutes, I sat on the edge of my bed, wondering if I should really go. A part of me whispered that it was foolish, that people my age should stay home, knit scarves, watch television, wait for phone calls that rarely come. But then I remembered Helen's words. You've survived too much to keep living small. So I made tea, dressed neatly, and packed a small notebook and pen into my old purse, the same one Arthur bought me decades ago. The leather was cracked now, but it still smelled faintly of the lavender oil I used to polish it with. Funny how small things can feel like courage. When I reached the community center, the building looked brighter than I'd expected. Sunlight spilling through wide glass windows, the sound of laughter echoing faintly from inside. A woman at the front desk greeted me with a smile that felt too young for my world. "Calligraphy class? Room 204 down the hall," she said, cheerfully tapping the register. Room 204. The hallway smelled faintly of paper and ink, and my heart pounded with the same nervousness I used to feel on my first day of school. I hesitated at the door before pushing it open. Inside, there were about a dozen people, men and women, most with silver hair and careful hands. Some chatted softly. Others already dipped their brushes into ink. At the front stood an elderly man with kind eyes and gold-rimmed glasses. He noticed me and smiled. "Ah, you must be our new student. Welcome, I'm James Peterson. Please, come in." I nodded, clutching my bag a little tighter. "I'm Martha," I said softly. "It's my first time, after a long time." He gestured toward an empty seat near the window. "Then you'll fit right in? Every artist here started again, one way or another." I sat down, my fingers trembling slightly, as I unpacked the brush and paper they'd provided. The woman beside me, short, round, with bright blue earrings, leaned over and whispered, "Don't worry. The first line's always the hardest. I'm Pat." Her smile reminded me of Helen. Warm, mischievous, alive. When the class began, Mr. Peterson spoke gently, his voice steady as water. "Calligraphy," he said, "isn't about perfection. It's about breathing. The ink listens to how you feel. If you rush, it rebels. If you're honest, it flows." He demonstrated on a long sheet of rice paper, one smooth stroke after another, black ink blooming like thought itself. Then he turned to us. "Now your turn. One line at a time." I dipped my brush into the ink. The bristles quivered, as if they too were afraid. The first stroke was shaky, the line uneven, too heavy on one side. I frowned, embarrassed, but Mr. Peterson only nodded approvingly. "Good. That's the sound of a hand remembering." Something inside me softened, so I tried again, and again. Each stroke steadier than the last, each one pulling me back toward a version of myself I hadn't met in years. A woman who used to create, not just serve. As the minutes passed, the noise of the room faded. All that existed was the paper, the brush, and the soft rhythm of breathing. Mine and the others. It felt like prayer, like silence given form. After class, Mr. Peterson stopped by my table. He looked at my paper, a dozen imperfect lines, and smiled. "You have a steady hand," he said. "I can tell you've spent your life caring for others. That kind of patience translates to art beautifully." I blinked back a sudden rush of tears. I didn't think I had anything left to give. He shook his head gently. "Oh, you have plenty left. You just forgot to give some of it to yourself." When the class ended, Pat invited me for tea with a few others at the center's small cafe. I almost said no. Old habits die hard. But something in me whispered, "Say yes this time." So I joined them. We talked about little things. The stubborn winter chill, the price of bread, the difficulty of keeping plants alive. But underneath it all there was laughter, lightness. No one asked me who I cooked for or who I lived with. They asked what I liked, what made me happy. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. When I got home that afternoon, the house was empty again. But this time, the silence didn't hurt. I placed my calligraphy paper on the dining table, smoothing it carefully. The lines weren't perfect, some too faint, others too bold. But they were mine. Emily came home later that evening. She noticed the paper and frowned slightly. "Oh, what's this?" "Just something I tried at the community center," I said. She looked surprised. "You joined a class?" "Yes," I replied, quietly proud. "Every Wednesday." She didn't say much after that. Maybe she didn't understand, or maybe she didn't care. But for once, that didn't matter, because I knew something she didn't. That every brushstroke on that paper was a piece of my voice returning to me. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the class, the smell of ink, the way Mr. Peterson said the ink listens. I realized that maybe, all along, I'd been waiting for someone to listen, but now I could listen to myself. Before turning off the light, I whispered softly, "Arthur, I think I'm finding the light you told me to look for." And for the first time in years, I fell asleep not as a mother or a widow, but as Martha, a woman who had finally begun again. Sometimes you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to stop whispering. The call came on an ordinary afternoon. I was arranging fresh lilies in a vase when the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, a tone too formal to be friendly. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Lin," a woman's voice said. "This is from the Wellington Development Office. We're confirming demolition of your property on Willow Street for next week. Funds will be transferred to the account ending in 3542. Thank you again for your authorization." My hand froze. I felt my heartbeat in my fingertips. That wasn't my account. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady only because it had no strength left to tremble. "Could you please repeat that account number?" She did, slowly, cheerfully, unaware that her words were undoing 40 years of motherhood. Then she said, "The authorization was under both names, yours and your son's. Everything's finalized now." I thanked her, because that's what I'd been trained to do my whole life, to stay polite, even when something inside me was breaking. When I hung up, the house felt colder than ever. I didn't cry, not at first. Instead, I just sat down at the table, hands folded neatly in my lap, and let the silence surround me. The same silence that had filled this house for years. Except now, I finally understood what it was trying to tell me. When Daniel came home that evening, I was waiting. Dinner was ready. Simple, quiet, just like always. He walked in, smiling, loosening his tie. "Hey, Mom," he said casually. "Everything okay?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. The lines of worry on his forehead. The tired eyes. The way he carried himself like a man who thought control was love. I wanted to see my son, the boy who used to leave me daisies on the porch. But I couldn't find him. So I asked softly, "Why didn't you tell me you sold the house?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Mom, I was going to. It's just, things were moving fast and you forged my signature." I interrupted gently. "Did you know I'd find out, or did you think I wouldn't look?" The silence that followed was thick. He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, it wasn't like that. I wanted to take care of it. For you. For us. That house was falling apart. For me," I said quietly. "You took the last thing your father built with his hands. The only place where my name still meant something. Tell me, Daniel, was that for me or for your convenience?" His jaw clenched. "You're being unfair. I've given you everything. This home, comfort, family." "Family?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you call it family when you hide the truth from your mother? When you silence her for your ease?" He tried to speak again, but the words tangled in his throat. Behind him, Emily stood in the doorway, arms folded, her face pale. "Mom, please," she said softly. "You're misunderstanding. We just wanted what's best." I turned to her, and for the first time my voice didn't shake. "No, Emily, you wanted what's convenient. You wanted a quiet, helpful woman in your kitchen. Not a person with a mind, a past, a right to her own home." Her eyes darted away. No one spoke. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate between ticks. Then I said the words that had been waiting for years. "I'm done living small." Daniel looked stunned. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I said, standing, "that I can't stay here anymore. Not as your caretaker. Not as your silence." His voice cracked. "You're leaving?" I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that holds both pain and peace. "Yes, I don't know where yet." But anywhere is better than being a ghost in my own life. He stepped forward, his expression breaking. Part guilt, part disbelief. Mom, please. I raised a hand gently. I'm not angry, Daniel. You did what you thought was right. And maybe one day you'll understand that what I'm doing now is right too. For a long moment he just stood there, tears welling quietly in his eyes. Then he whispered, I'm sorry. I nodded. I know. And that was enough. Not forgiveness, not yet, but truth. That night I sat by the window, Arthur's letter in my lap. Outside the moonlight fell across the street, soft and silver. I read his words again, the ones I had nearly forgotten. You are the story too. Don't fade, my love. I smiled through my tears. I didn't fade, Arthur, I whispered. I found my way back. Then I opened the window wide, letting the cool night air fill the room. It smelled like rain and something else. Freedom, maybe. For the first time in years, I felt light. No bitterness, no fear, no waiting. Just peace. Quiet, steady peace. They took her house, but not her home, because she carried it inside her. Every laugh, every memory, every piece of love that built her. And when she finally walked away, she didn't lose anything. She simply took herself back.